to be the moderator for today. My name is Chris Bell. I'm the Assistant Director of Education for e-learning for Julian Charter School out of San Diego County. I'm also a board member of Orange County Q. I actually live, I'm a model of living somewhere and working somewhere else. So I live in Orange County, work remotely. I'm also the chair of Q, Q's e-learning special interest group, which is LSIG, which is the California affiliate for the International Association for K-12 Online Learning. So we are involved in INACL's efforts to expand online learning throughout the state, and then also providing professional development and interaction for administration and teachers. I've got some 4 panelists plus 1 online, and we'll kind of introduce some of them. One person does not have a slide because Bob filled in so graciously. We have Robert Craven. He's a technology specialist from Saddleback Valley Unified. He's a Q board member. He's actually the treasurer. Is that correct?
Vice President.
Vice President, sorry. I should know this.
Vice President / I get both. So.
You get it all. He's an Apple Distinguished Educator, a Google Certified Teacher, a technology savant, you name it. I'll let him introduce. Anything else I missed there?
No, I think you covered it all. So.
Okay, perfect. Well, we're glad to have Robert. Robert was on our panel last year. We had him Skyping in from Kentucky. So this year we're fortunate to have him in person. We also have Rajeshri Gandhi, who is the Dean of Education at Fairmont Preparatory Academy. She is not a board member of Orange County Q, and I don't know how that got there. So that's bad slush. Would you like to tell us more about what you do?
Sure. I'm the Dean of Education at Fairmont Prep, and we run blended courses both in the school year and in our summer program. I'm also the academic advisor for Thesis International, who actually creates the courses that we run, the blended courses. So I oversee both the prep as well as the creation of the courses for Thesis.
Excellent. Thank you. Glad to have you here today.
Thanks.
We also have Marty Atkinson. She's a coordinator for @ONE, who does some great things with online professional development for community colleges as well as K-12 teachers. They run a certification program that has been going on for what now? The second year now? Second year?
It's in the second year. It's been quite successful. I think we have about 300 people in it now.
And she is the Online Teaching Conference chair, I believe. That's the title.
Coordinator officially.
See, I get it all wrong.
That's okay.
That's because I didn't run. This was like I didn't run it by you, but she is a Wonder Woman. She's been doing this. This is what you said, your 8th conference.
8th and final.
And final, as she said. She said that She did say this last year. So I don't know. If
This is
really
the last year. My husband will divorce me otherwise.
And she's a Wonder Woman. She does a very good job of herding cats, as I like to say.
Yes.
And then we have on Skype Rob Darrow, EDD, and I'll let Rob introduce himself. Rob has recently retired from education after many, many years, and let me pull Rob up so everyone can see him. Rob, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself since you're there via Skype.
Hi, everybody. I just retired from the Clovis Unified School District as principal of the Clovis Online School, a charter school in Clovis Unified, and I'm not ending education. I'm on a different educational journey, which is hopefully helping school districts and colleges provide online learning solutions for all students. So happy to be with you here today via Skype.
Thanks, Rob. We really appreciate you Skyping in with us. Okay, so what we're going to do, we'll open up we're going to ask some questions of the panel, and obviously one of the things we want to talk about is the definition of blended learning. There's a lot of different conceptions out there of what blended learning is, and there's a lot of jockeying in the e-learning online space right now to really kind of come up with a definition that is actually fitting. So to that end, I'm going to open it up. How do you define blended learning, and what do you believe distinguishes blended learning from a tech-enriched one-to-one program, if you have one-to-one laptop or a one-to-one iPad? And let's give Rob the opportunity to respond first. Sorry, throwing you under the bus on that one.
I appreciate that. So the challenge with blended learning and the definitions that are out there, in my opinion, are they're too broad. So it's easier, in my mind, to talk about what, in my mind, blended learning is not. So I was at the Q conference, and Michael Horn, who's got a big definition of online learning, says, he gives his definition, and then a teacher next to me says, oh, our teachers put our lessons online, so we're doing blended learning. And I said, no, that's not blended learning. It's not about professors putting articles on a blackboard. That's not blended learning. It's not about people just putting stuff online. Blended learning is more than that. It's all about using the tools to teach with. So if you're teaching in a face-to-face classroom, you might use online discussion boards to teach something that you didn't otherwise do before. In my mind, it's more about the pedagogy than the tools. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Let's see, who else would, anybody else want to respond on that? I'll open it up to you guys.
For the community colleges, at the Chancellor's office, they have some real stringent guidelines about so much of the teaching is face-to-face, certain percentage is online. And though, depending on the percentages, if it's web-enhanced learning, blended, or completely online. And believe me, people constantly argue what those percentages are.
So those percentages that you're referring to are probably the Allen and Seaman study, which was, that showed, I want to believe, 30 to 79% of a course had to be completed online for it to be considered blended. Anything below that was not a blended course. Anything above that was completely
Those
online.
are approximate, and
Yeah.
there's been arguments up and down what the
Yeah.
percentages are.
That's where the argument and the definition is really powerful. Brian?
Also a definition that they created in 2002.
That's true.
That's a good point, and that's why the argument continues.
I think in our setting, we define blended, we've got a 60-40, and it can go either way depending on the content area. It's not necessarily just about the time. I think it's very much about the experience and what happens in the classroom setting. When we're talking about 14 and 15-year-olds, part of the advantages of a blended learning kind of environment, it does give the student a fair amount of choice and responsibility for his or her own learning. So and that sort of goes to the next question you asked about what distinguishes blended learning from a one-to-one. A one-to-one still has a teacher as the moderator because it's still all done pretty much in the classroom. One of the things we use blended for is to really allow students to sort of take their own responsibility, move at their own pace, be held accountable to certain standards and benchmarks, but for a 15-year-old to be able to choose when he or she completes an assignment does quite a bit for the motivation of that student, and it does make the in-class experience far more rich than if we're trying to herd cats in a classroom. When they come in and they've had that choice and they're sort of feeling in control of their learning, they tend to be far more focused and motivated when they're in the classroom, making that experience even more enriching. We've seen with our science classes, for example, we like to have a higher amount of time in the classroom simply to be able to complete lab work under the guidance of a teacher. We don't really want kids playing around with chemistry, chemicals at home. We'd rather have them in our labs with goggles and someone watching them. But with our math classes or our English classes, for example, the opposite has been true. A lot of the independent work, a lot of the practice, a lot of the sort of writing and analysis can be done at a student's own pace and at his or her own time, making the classroom more about discussion, more about, clarifying misconceptions from before and previewing what's to come ahead.
That's a good point about blended learning, making the face-to-face classroom time count more and making it more significant.
Mm-hmm.
Bob, Bob teaches online predominantly, but how has that impacted your face-to-face? Has that impacted your face-to-face classroom?
Yeah, my name is Bob Hiles. I teach in the Newport Mesa Unified School District. I teach at Corona Del Mar High School. I've been the online program coordinator for about 5 years. We've been offering a few online classes in our district, courses developed by our teachers and taught by our teachers. And I had the fortune to have a percentage of my day I was able to work at the district, and the other time I was able to work online. So for a few years, I had the great opportunity to just basically all my teaching placement was online. Then that position at the district got eliminated. I went back to the school, and I was doing some online classes, some face-to-face, and it was a big transition going back to being a traditional classroom teacher. And the biggest transition I noticed was the time. Mm-hmm. I was used to being able to kind of outsource assignments, projects, project-based learning that could take 4 or 5 hours, and it's really easy to do asynchronously. You give a kid a week to do it, and they can do the assignment easily. But now I had them in the classroom, and I had to watch them on the computer lab to make sure that they weren't making the funny, beeping sounds on the Mac computers in the computer lab, or that I had to worry about taking a roll, or we had a fire drill, and it seemed like such a waste of time going from that transition from being a classroom teacher to an online teacher to back to being a classroom teacher, I noticed a lot of wasted time. Rob, did you have something to add there?
For a little while.
Oh. But as far as the definition of online, I noticed, I'm wondering if I'm actually meeting the definition for blended learning right now. This past year, I had 2 online classes and 3 AP classes. AP classes were face-to-face. I teach advanced placement, American democracy, or American government, and advanced placement, macroeconomics. So basically, similar to what, if there's anybody in the audience that are community college districts, it'd be the same thing, that, you know, the political science 101 and intro macroeconomics. And, but we met 5 days a week. We met in a regular classroom, but I outsourced as much as I could to make the class time more efficient. So we did threaded discussions instead of doing classroom time to do discussions. I put, if they turned in assignments, they did it online in the Dropbox. We used a learning management system. I posted practice questions before the actual test. On test days, we would go into the computer lab and they would take the test in the computer lab using the learning management system, because the old way of doing tests with paper and Scantrons is so inefficient. And the kids loved it, doing it on the computer, because they could get immediate feedback.
Rob, you want to jump in here?
So I just want to illustrate that what Bob is saying, that's talking about how he changed his teaching, and that's what blended learning is all about. Just another comment about what it's not. So there are online programs where students meet with a teacher once a week, and as I talk to some of those students, they say, we come into this class and we do silent reading when we meet face-to-face. So that's another example of what not to do with blended learning.
Robert, did you want to add anything to the different, what would distinguish it from a one-to-one program?
Well, I'm trying to come up with something. I mean, I think distinguishing it from the, I'll try to do that over a little bit. Distinguishing it from a one-to-one program, I mean, I think a one-to-one program can be, depending again on the teacher, can wind up being very much what Rob was saying, which is just, some lessons are online, or the kids go and watch a video or something. That's not really necessarily a blended learning. But if you have a good teacher in there and the kids are using the devices, you can get into that blended learning environment where you have, even if they're meeting face-to-face on a week or on a daily basis, as Bob was talking about. I think as those activities are up there, as the instructor starts to use the class time for some online discussions, for maybe working in smaller groups with the students and directing the students in their own learning, as the other students are over the course of a week or 2 weeks working on a larger project or a larger topic where they're researching. So I think in looking in K-12 in particular, where it's still difficult to do a blended, that's kind of a 60-40 or a 70-30 split, something like that, but where you actually have, because of ADA, have to have the kids there for that time period every day. That's where I think the blended is going for K-12 right now, and I think when you have the one-to-one, it certainly complements it, but you do need a good, solid instructor that's going to be pushing the boundaries and understand what the blended environment is. And to go to what Rob was saying earlier, I think it really is about taking a lot of that experience that the students have outside of the classroom with the technology and drawing that experience into the classroom, as opposed to just making it technology for technology's sake or another tool in the classroom, but really looking at those social things that students are doing outside of class and the ways that they're learning and participating about, as we heard earlier this morning with Steve speaking as well, and making that part of the normal daily instruction for the students.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think we've really covered a lot of that. When we talk about, Rob mentioned the Insight Institute definition of blended, Michael Horn's definition, and basically his definition is that it's any time a student learns at least part-time in a supervised brick and mortar location, so something away from their home, and then obviously part-time through an online delivery system. He really focuses on control, the student having the element of control, and we've touched on some of those elements here, but really the control over time, place, path, or pace. So that really is one of the distinguishing things. And again, we're jockeying for definitions here. This is probably one of the better definitions, but Rob and I have kind of been dialoguing back and forth on how it's a pedagogical shift. So that really kind of shifts to the nature of the next question, which is, what is the role of the teacher in a blended learning environment? Now, we could cover this. There's 6 different models that the Insight Institute put forth. We'll not cover those today. Let's just talk about what we're looking at now, what we're seeing with teachers who are trying to implement blended, like with Bob and things of that nature. In that type of environment, what is the role? Is it really to develop lectures, or is it to really shift the way you're looking at instruction? So, Rob, do you want to jump on that, or if anybody else wants to take that on ahead first, go right ahead.
Does somebody else want to go, or you want me to go?
Go ahead, Rob.
Okay, so if you haven't read about what flip teaching is, it's worth finding out about flip teaching. I would say that for a teacher teaching online or in blended learning, in my mind, they're taking advantage of all of the things that the web has to offer. All of the Web 2.0 tools, all of those things are integrated into the ongoing teaching and learning in a classroom. If you're only using your course management system, if you're only using a program learning program, you're missing out on what blended learning can truly be. So I would simply say that it's taking advantage and learning ongoing the new tools that are on the web that can be used to teach and learn with.
I would just say that I think effective instruction is effective instruction, regardless of the medium. So when you start looking at the elements of effective instruction, what a blended learning environment allows you to do is eliminate some of the management issues, some of the routines, attendance, discipline, etc., which take up a lot of teacher time. If you look at just studies on what teachers spend their time doing, it's amazing how much just your time is spent on non-instructional tasks. You take that away for part of the time, you have the advanced, the accelerated student motivation with the choice, and then you're able to really focus in on some of those more overarching goals, creating strong objectives, meaningful experiences, integration within curriculum. And as a teacher, a blended environment not only eliminates some of the management issues, it allows you to have access to more tools to start creating those experiences. And it's really not different than a really effective classroom instructor. It's just done in a different way and allows, I think, more instructors to be that sort of supremely effective instructor, because you're able to spend more of your time and resources in actually creating experiences for your students, and have students in turn who have accepted responsibility for being a part of that and have that, their own part in creating that learning experience. So when I think of blended, I think of it as, yes, online and in the classroom. I also think of it as a blended teaching and learning experience between the student and the teacher, because now the student is a very big part of what happens on his or her own individual basis.
I would just add, with the from the traditional K-12 scenario, one of the big responsibilities of a teacher is the custodial, responsibilities that you have, which is you've got those kids in a traditional bell schedule, 55 minutes, 5 days a week. And so you can come up with these really great ideas, but then what happens if the class finishes a half hour early? There are a bunch of kids, it takes longer, or that there's just certain issues that go on. What I found, having the experience that I did going from traditional to online to a blend of the two, is that I noticed a lot of teachers just kind of will watch movies because they've got 2 hours left at the end of the unit, and they're going to wait till Monday, or there's a vacation coming up. Thanksgiving is coming up on Thursday, and they're going to be gone, so they don't want to start a new unit on Tuesday, so they watch Finding Nemo for 2 days. They're just killing time. And so that happens a lot in a traditional setting. In the online, it's great because you can teach asynchronously. You can outsource things. You can assign projects where the kids could do it on their own time. To me, that's the ultimate thing to be as a teacher, is where you could focus on the kids just doing the pedagogy, just doing the curriculum, and not have to worry about, I've got to fill 2 hours now because half the kids went on a field trip.
Bob, I want to touch on something. You just said you keep referring to outsourcing, and it's your. I'll let you use that term. But how have the kids? What has been the students' response that were not taking an online class, and you started to move more of the activities outside of the classroom? What was their response? And to that end, what was the parents' response?
It's actually been very supportive, because I only teach 12th graders, seniors, and their senior year is really busy. They're taking, usually what we have at my school, a lot of kids taking multiple AP classes. They're studying for the SAT, they're putting their college apps together, and then they're visiting colleges. They're doing sports and things like that. They'll miss a lot of school their senior year. And so putting things up online is great because the parents and the students know they could go to the calendar and they could know exactly what we did, the 3 days that they were visiting East Coast schools. They can get all the assignments. They can get all the worksheets. They can turn in the worksheets online. They don't have to wait till they get back and then get the handouts from me and then turn in the stuff later on. They can stay current. And so I've noticed it's been much more efficient for a use of my time. I don't have to get the parent phone call saying my son's going to be gone, he's going to be visiting schools, can I get the homework? They don't even have to ask me, they just know everything is available online. And they can still abide by the same timeline as everybody else. If they've got a computer, they could be in Boston and they could still be turning in the work.
Robert? Or Marty?
Oh, I'm going to take a totally different approach. I have been mostly working in higher ed, but I have worked with high school students. I'm a big believer in collaborative project-based learning. So I see the role of the teacher, of the instructor, as much more of a coach and a facilitator. And I like the students to pick and get involved with projects that they can really get involved with. And I found when I tried to teach things in a more didactic, traditional manner, the students just were bored. I was bored. I didn't like it. When I put the same information packaged in a project that the students really liked and chose themselves and worked together, they learned at least 5 times than what standing up and lecturing did. And I would teach them enough to get started, and then as they learned, I would put the students up and say, show the rest of the class what you just learned, or show them this trick. And it was amazing. So the role difference, I think, is really crucial in the thinking about teaching online, teaching in blended versus teaching in a traditional manner.
I agree a lot with what you just said, Marty. I think that's very, very much what we're seeing, at least in the K-12 environment right now. And the role of the teacher certainly does change. You really do have to be that facilitator. You really do have to be somebody, I believe, that is comfortable with that collaborative project, that chaos, exactly, because that's what it is. But what I noticed going into those rooms is that there's just, even from the youngest second graders, where we have them doing a lot of blended up through high school, there's an enormous level of excitement in those classrooms that's not taking place in other classrooms. And in talking with the teachers, one thing I find with the teachers is that constantly the teachers are telling me, well, there's a lot when I first start doing this and jump into it. It takes quite a while and a lot of extra time. But afterwards, that starts to go away, and what we're finding is that we're able to cover more content because the kids get so excited, they get so vested in what they're doing that they go off and start doing an awful lot of research. And utilizing the technology, they're able to much more rapidly create those collaborative projects and create those interesting examples of their own knowledge of the topic than they were if we were sitting in the classroom just writing the report or doing cutting something out or drawing pictures. They're just saying the amount of time we're saving that way is making it all worthwhile, and the level of understanding that the students are reaching is just so much greater.
I call it the Zen of teaching.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Rob, anything else to add, Rob?
No, I think those are good examples.
Okay, excellent. So obviously when we start looking at the pedagogical shift that needs to take place, and I would include that the desire to get away from trying to control where every student is at any given moment, how do we best prepare teachers for blended learning environments? What can we do? I mean, naturally there's certifications, things. We're doing, obviously, leading edge certification, but beyond that, what can we do at our local site level to prepare teachers to teach in these types of environments? I'm going to throw it to Robert.
You're going to throw it to Dan. He's going to do that. Yeah, I knew that. Again, coming from a K-12, it certainly is an enormous challenge. I think one of the best things you can do is start taking teachers, is first identifying who's the next wave of either subject area or site or grade level teachers that you're going to start really pushing the blended environment with, and then taking them out to those sites, those classrooms where it's already happening, and let them see what's going on, and then take them back and work with them on everything from, the technology aspects so they feel comfortable with that, but also really doing a lot on the curriculum and developing some of those projects and getting them feeling comfortable with a lot of that collaborative learning and that controlled chaos that's happening in the classroom. I also think pushing, and Rob was talking earlier, it's not just about the learning management system and things, but that is a crucial part of it, at least in K-12, what we're finding. And so the more that we can put everybody across the district into that same learning management system, into having to use that system for everything from a simple teacher website on up to communication amongst faculty at a site level or professional development happening at the district level. So the more we can push that from the district with a single purpose of having all the teachers use that on a continual basis, I think that dramatically assists us as well, because now when we go in and we start looking and saying to 8th grade health teachers, okay, we're going to begin more of an 8th grade blended online health for you, they feel comfortable with the learning management system. They feel comfortable with how to go about participating in a discussion, accessing materials that are up there, putting materials into that learning management system. And so I think from a district perspective, that's one of the key things that we need to be doing to ensure teachers are ready for this as we move forward.
I guess one thing I was thinking of was there are a lot of institutional roadblocks that kind of get in the way of a teacher using a lot of the interactive tools. I'm just thinking of so many of my students are using Facebook and Twitter, and that's their primary way of communicating now. So if you send them an email, they don't get it. If you do that's the way they communicate, is through text messaging, Twitter, and Facebook. And so if a teacher is, and I'm noticing most of the teachers at my school are using Twitter and Facebook, but they haven't bridged the gap to use that in education. And one is because they don't necessarily want to blend their personal and professional life together. And then the other as well is that a lot of districts block it or have policies against the teacher using it. And so I think those are some challenges that need to be worked through. Is I think it would be very easy for a teacher to use Twitter and Facebook to communicate with their students, and vice versa, to have the students communicate with the teachers. But we've got to work through some of the legal or logistical roadblocks that are in place for that now.
Rob, jump on. It looks like you wanted to say something.
So in traditional professional development, in different school districts or colleges, either it's a sort of thing where you sign up and you attend, or in some schools there's mandated professional development, or sometimes teachers actually say this is the kind of professional development we want and it's provided. In the online or blended learning world, we've got to teach teachers how to develop their own professional or personal learning networks, because things are changing so fast you can't possibly provide everything that's needed to a teacher. So part of it is teaching teachers how to teach themselves as they're going along in the world of professional learning communities and or a personal learning network. I think that part's critical. And I'll stop there.
I would agree with you on that point. As I lead teachers, they're constantly coming to me for guidance and resources on different things, and I'm happy to provide that, but I'm also trying to show them how they can tap into a larger network of people. You have a question?
Hi, thanks for letting me ask a question. What do you think the role is for teacher preparation programs for pre-service teachers to get them prepared for this?
That was my next question.
Segue.
Good segue.
Yeah, perfect segue. You must have read my mind. Well, what we're kind of seeing out there is that schools, charter schools in different places, they're really just kind of having to do it themselves right now, because a lot of the teacher preparation programs are not there yet. You have some good programs out there. Boise State has some great things with what Lisa Dolly's doing, Kathy Kavanaugh, and they've been traditionally focused on online learning, which does translate well for blended teaching. But right now what we see, and what most of us probably experienced when we went through a teacher preparation program, is focused on classroom management, not content, not instructional design, not curation of content. So it looks like Rob wants to jump onto what I'm saying, and that's basically, I think that they need to start shifting in that direction. Rob?
So I'll just say that, so I just finished my doctorate at Fresno State here where I live, and my chief complaint is that everything was done face-to-face. The most technology used was teachers said, oh, well, go read this article on Blackboard. Okay, so The problem with colleges and with K-12 learning is that you say, hey, go do this. So if pre-service teaching is going to do anything, they've got to utilize these tools, which gets back to professional development, teaching teachers how to utilize these tools. So that's kind of the catch-22. But you can't talk about how to use Twitter or how to use a blog or how to use online discussions if you don't use them yourself as part of the actual teaching.
One of the things I noticed in my teacher prep program is, I think, independent of blended learning, online learning, traditional, in general, the programs need to be more student-centric. It was all about what the teacher does, and that's why you get a lot of the management instead of how a student learns. So I think that as teacher programs start to focus a little bit more on the learner, it's inevitable that as these students are changing, as these, as their world is changing, it's inevitable that we have to start including some of what they're doing in their daily lives in school. School shouldn't be a break from their daily lives, in terms of if they're, I just watched some of these young kids who are able to manipulate all kinds of things on an iPad. A 3-year-old or a 2-year-old can show us something that they know because they can touch it. And then all of a sudden we stop that and we say, okay, but now it's time to, do this in school. Even though you're capable of doing this, we're going to have you do something much more simple in school, simply because that's just the way we have been instructing them. I think as we start seeing that we have to meet the needs of students, more so than the needs of schools or teachers or the adults in the equation, some of this shift is going to have to start to naturally happen.
I think there's got to be kind of a spark with the teacher themselves as far as how much they want to integrate the technology. I've had students that text message me Friday night at the football game asking me about an assignment. And I reply back to them, what are you doing talking to me right now? Aren't you supposed to be watching the game? Oh, yeah, the game's going on, we're winning. But the expectation is that they can get a hold of the teacher 24/7, 7 days a week. And there's some old school, no pun intended, teachers that are out there that just, they want to clock in at 7:30, they want to leave at 3:30, and that's it. That's their day. And that's kind of not how the students and the parents expect it. If they're going to send you communication Friday night, they want a response Friday night. They don't want to wait till Monday morning. And so I think it becomes, with myself and a lot of the people I know that are really involved in educational technology, it's a part of your fiber using technology all the time. And so forcing some of these old school teachers into using, I mean, we had teachers and administrators in our district fight using email. And so if they don't even want to use email, it's impossible to try to have them go through a professional development program and then try to force them to use, a lot of Web 2.0 tools.
Rob, looks like you wanted to say something really quick.
Oh, no, I couldn't agree with Bob even more, but I do want to point out for the people in the audience that so Bob has chosen to allow his students to text message him on, I'm assuming, his personal phone. So that's a challenge for some people to think in those terms. But I will also say that in the online school where I was principal, the most effective tool we had was instant messenger, where students and teachers could instant message throughout the day as they had questions.
Hi, I'm Alan Grant from Drexel University, and I would also add that while we're failing our teachers in our teacher prep programs, we're also failing our administrators. Rarely do we have an administrative program that focuses on virtual learning at all, and so we're just perpetuating that entire mindset of the administrative roadblocks that you're talking about. And there's not much that we're really doing about that at the university level as well. So I just want to add that.
That is a good point. And it's like everything, inevitably that will change as more and more younger generation rise up into administrative leadership. They're going to seek out those options and want that. So I think that the preparation programs will respond to that. Anybody else want to add anything else to that?
Just on the need to set boundaries and student expectations. But when you are teaching online and people know your text, your cell phone, and whatever else, the billions of ways that they can get a hold of you, is you've got, or at least my point is, I tell my students, look, I will respond to you within 24 hours if I can, much sooner most of the time. But let's face it, I have a life, and on weekends, it's not going to be as fast. So just, give me a break, and I'll do the best I can.
Good point. Okay, so how do we prepare students for learning in blended environments? Some of the things we've noticed, just anecdotally when flipping the classroom with our blended programs, has been that students have had a hard time adjusting to some of the expectations. They were used to doing kind of kill and drill type homework, and it shifted the nature of what they're supposed to do. And then when they come in, they were used to kind of zoning out for a lecture, for that face-to-face time, and now they have to actually do something. So students were having a hard time adjusting, but a lot of students responded very well. So how do we kind of shift it? If we ended up with a model, obviously not every district can apply that model, but there are a lot who can, where students are only coming on 3 days a week. How do we prepare them for that? Or how do we even prepare our kids who are in a traditional system to make sure that they're doing the things they need to do at home so that when you actually come in, they're more productive?
Well, one of the things that we didn't do as well the first time, and we've changed for the second time, is actually teaching students what's expected of them. We sort of assume that they would know, you're in this new environment, here's but concretely identifying some behaviors of successful students and saying this is kind of what students did in order to be, and here's what you're expected to do. We're about to launch our second summer of blended learning on Monday, and that's part of our orientation. In some of the courses, we sort of identified some key behaviors and said, okay, and then correlated it to grades and said, okay, students, everything from accessing the LMS offline, when they're not, outside of class time, to the types of times they interacted with the teachers. I mean, a lot of it's just numerical. We're just going through this the first time. But we did identify some behaviors that we noticed were strongly correlated with performance. So sharing those with students ahead of time and just preparing them for what is going to be expected of them, rather than assuming that they're going to know or be able to follow the directions, is something that we're hoping will help more students be successful in this kind of a program.
Yes, setting clear expectations of the students when their deadlines are, what they're supposed to be turning in at different points, all helps.
I'll kind of tee this up for Rob and Robert here, but I think the orientation is really important. I know Rob spent, I don't know if it was nearly a week of doing orientation for his online students. That is really huge. You can't just give the keys to the kid and let him drive the car. You've got to go through the driver training program. So the orientation is really huge, and I think as far as Robert is concerned, he kind of alluded, I know they're doing online courses down to the middle school. I think if we could get the kids early, even into the primary grades where they're doing some activities, then that makes it so much easier. The expectation I notice, and we still get it, is the kids are going to take an online class because they think it's going to be really easy, independent study. Just give me a packet, I'll do it at home, and then I'll turn it in. And that's not how independent study is nowadays. That's not how online learning is. And so I think that has to be part of the expectation also, is that the best practices of online learning is they're doing project-based learning, they're doing constructivist learning, they're interacting with the curriculum, there's rigor and there's standards. And that's a transition for some kids if they get into an online course that's set up effectively.
Rob, did you want to jump in there?
The first summer we did online courses with students, 50% of them dropped out. Yeah. And I would call them up and say, so why'd you drop out? And a majority of them said, I couldn't figure out how to log in. From that point forward, we provided more and more training for students face-to-face, whether they're going to be online or in a blended learning environment. We now have established a series of competencies for students, and if you go to Twitter and find me, you'll see that I just posted a link to the Clovis Online School wiki where we've got all the student competencies we expect for students to be successful in the online environment. And we put students through a week-long online training. We use the system Moodle, so of course that training is part of Moodle, and it's all integrated together using the tools that we use throughout our schools. So absolutely there has to be training. Students will not be successful if there's not some sort of face-to-face training as part of the program.
You want to add, and then we'll take a question?
Yeah, if I can add real quick.
Please.
I can kind of identify two things that I think are real important. One is certainly the training that you've all mentioned is essential. Again, I like coming, from the district perspective, really focusing in on a few key technologies that we want the students using to at least start or initiate into the online courses, I think is fantastic for us. So the fact that as a district we can start kindergarten through 12th grade, every student with an account logging in, access to Google Docs, access to the LMS system, and the fact that the teachers and the principals and, you know, even the superintendent on down, everybody's expected to be using those 3 tools, the portal, Google Docs, and the learning management system. That right there sets an expectation for the students and also sets a level of understanding from the youngest ages on up. So I think that's one of the things that's essential from, at least as I'm looking at it, and developing a program that students will be successful in when they're in middle school and high school and beyond, is starting them early. And one of the best things I think for doing that is to start training the elementary teachers so that we are building in things like discussion forums. We are building in the, you know, literature circle taking place online in the classroom maybe, and having that happen in a 1st grade, a 2nd grade, a 3rd grade classroom, so that by the time the kids are hitting 5th grade, 6th grade, the parents are starting to say to the teachers or the principal, hey, why don't we have a one-to-one program? Why aren't our kids accessing this throughout the day? They were doing it earlier. We see great benefit for it. Why isn't that happening? And that's what we're seeing now, is there's pressure, and it's gone now beyond that upper elementary level, and that pressure is now hitting the intermediate schools, and it's already starting to hit the high schools, where the parents are now saying, wait, they've been doing this for years now. Why are we not doing it at the high school? And that, I think, is causing a profound change in among some of the teachers and administration at the high school levels, and I'm sure that'll hit you guys in community college in another few years. So,
Go ahead. Thank you. Thanks, Robert.
That's a perfect segue. I'm Janet Ration. I come from a K-2 school, and so that was kind of my question, is how examples of schools out there that have started at the K level and how they do the flip learning modality when you have to integrate parent buy-in as well, and also parent participation, because you can't just say to a 6-year-old, they know how to do it, but you also have to monitor them, and they don't necessarily know how to read. Yes, it can be visual, but there's at some point they can't type that well, and
right.
so that was my question.
I think it's great. From what we've been seeing, the parents are very receptive of it, especially at that younger, 2nd grade. We've seen really impressive results in 2nd grade, I think. And I don't know what the magic is at 2nd grade that makes it a good spot to start. But I do think the parents like that. Yeah, I think that's probably part of it, right? They can read, they can start typing. But the parents, I think from the parental perspective, they really enjoy being able to concretely know how they can help and assist their child, and it's something other than just the worksheet or ditto that's coming home. They can see that something's really happening in the classroom. There's some creative thinking, some construction, and that the students are going back and reflecting upon what they're doing when they're participating in a discussion forum, or, if it's video and then discussion forum, they're getting into the classroom, and I think that's what a lot of the parents want. And you see, a lot of parents going and helping out at kindergarten and 1st grade, and then it dwindles to the time when they, hit intermediate school or high school. You never see a parent on the campus, right? So I think it's keeping them engaged, and I believe, at least from having spoken with a few parents, that's what they really appreciate about it and why they want to see it continuing.
You also can really make use of visual and audio type tools, so they don't need to read. I mean, there's Skype, there's the iPad, there's amazing things that are coming out.
VoiceThread.
The kids pick up, voice threads. I mean, it's amazing how fast they pick that up.
Rob, did you want to add anything?
No, I just was excited about Robert's use of the word ditto, brought back purple-smelling smells.
Did I age myself on that one?
Memories.
I couldn't help but Twitter that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so just briefly, we'll touch on this. What do you believe the challenge that districts or schools face when implementing blended learning? What are some of the challenges that they're currently facing? Robert, what are some of the things that you have dealt with internally as you've implemented blended?
Yeah, the challenges are enormous. I mean, everything from just starting with the way ADA is recorded in the state poses an enormous challenge in ed code, to actually being able to pull in, young kids from kindergarten, 2nd grade on up. That is, I think, first and foremost, the biggest challenge we face right now, at least in California. I think once that's changed, we'll have some more freedom and flexibility to go about doing other programs. Space is certainly another consideration, being able to find a viable location to utilize, although in California with declining enrollment, that's maybe becoming a little bit easier in a lot of districts. But I think getting administrators on board with this idea of, perhaps giving up a portion of the campus to be a more flexible space for students to be not there every single day, but checking in a couple days a week, again, with faculty, getting them to the point of understanding that. So I think there's numerous challenges, but the first and foremost is that, the ADA in the state and the way we allocate attendance and dollars in the state. Once that legislation changes, I think that'll open the doors to some really innovative methods of thinking about this in California, at least.
If we're going to go along the line here, I would say with the teacher training as well is really big. I was fortunate to be part of the work group that put together the leading edge certification for online teaching, and it is so many examples I've seen where a teacher 2 weeks before the semester starts, and it always happens in like a regular, traditional sense, where the day before the semester starts, all of a sudden you find out you're teaching, U.S. history, even though you're an English teacher or something like that. So that happens a lot. But then the same thing, even worse, I think, is when it happens where they say, all right, we're going to start the online U.S. history and you're teaching it. And so the teacher training gets to be really important about that you can't just transfer what you did in the classroom and then port it online. And so groups like CUE and NACOL are great as far as being a clearinghouse for research. It's great that research and statistics are being published. Studies are being found that talk about the quality and the best practices of online. So I think we need to do our homework as far as doing that kind of research, and then also with the training involved in what is effective online learning.
I'd say for us, we're a private school, so the ADA doesn't become an issue. A couple of our big obstacles are cost. It's very expensive to do this right, and we've seen that. The other thing is, I'd say, buy-in and mindset. We've got a lot of our parents who say, this sounds great, but don't do it with my kid because I don't want to take a chance on my student not being ready to attend whatever college in the next few years. So one of the things we've been doing to combat some of that is we're starting to do some longitudinal studies. So when a student takes a blended course, for example, we're now correlating the grade in that blended course with the grade in the next course as a means of just understanding, A, did the student do well in the blended course, and B, if the student did do well in the blended course, did that set them up for success in the next course that's sort of built upon it. It's still a small sample size, but what we're seeing is students perform the same or better in the next course. And so as we start to build more of that data, we're seeing more and more interest in, and that sort of risk aversion is going away a bit. But that's definitely one of our biggest challenges because our students, they're used to a certain type of education. It's the same education that their parent had and probably their parents. So to try and change that right now, they're not necessarily ready for that change.
I really think you're going a good direction, because as we were starting the community college online programs and the training and all of that, we really didn't know what we were doing at the beginning. Fortunately, that was at least 10 years ago, and we have a better idea of what we're doing. But we did keep really close track, statistics, and I know a lot of people will start to yawn, but where were our successes? Where were our failures? It's really important to take a close look at that, and you learn. Get feedback from the students, from the teachers, get feedback from people. It may not be what you want to hear. In fact, very often, some of the best changes will be from your worst critics. But just keep an open mind and keep watching, what helps, what moves forward, and what wasn't productive and you're not going to try again.
Rob, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think the important thing is if there are people in the room who have not started movement towards blended learning or online learning programs, you need to start, because it's an option for students and it will become a greater option in the future. If you're a classroom teacher and you're frustrated with your technology department, then figure out a way around it. You don't have to fight them. Sometimes you got to be a little subversive in teaching. This is a bottom-up and a top-down movement. I wouldn't focus on the top-down pieces, the policy pieces, unless you're a superintendent or a principal, you could help move that policy. But if you're a classroom teacher, it's very difficult to work at that level. So you figure out what you can work on. If you can't use one website, then use a different website. In my school district, we couldn't get our wikis to work internally, so we went to an outside wiki. We didn't ask permission, we just did it because it benefited students. And that's really the bottom line here, is what's going to benefit student learning. And that's the thing to keep in mind. It's really all about the students and what you need to do to help them.
And just to add to that, if you want to be a subversive teacher, learn it's much easier to ask for forgiveness than it is ask for permission.
Right on, Marty. Yeah.
All right, everybody. What I'd like to do is give about 30 seconds wrap up question, and then I'd like to open it up to the audience for some questions if they have anything else that they'd like to jump in on. What's your vision of the future of blended learning? So you got 30 seconds. Go, whoever would like to go first. What's your vision?
I would say more use of the social networking tools. Like I said, I see the definition of a professional day for a teacher changing a lot. Where, like I said, instead of just going 7:30 to 3:30, that's going to change. If you're not going to be showing up, if you're going to do a mix where you come in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday instead of the 5-day-a-week thing, there's going to be a trade-off, which is now you're expected to be available in the evenings or the weekends or something like that. There's got to be a lot more flexibility than contractually obligated amount of time that you have to. I've heard some schools, they have to actually have a time clock to check in and check out to show that they're completing the professional day. I don't see that happening in the future. It's just got to be so much more flexible.
The only thing I can add, well, I started with computers back in the late 60s, so I am really an ancient geek. But to keep an open mind, technology changes and evolves so fast. Right now the big thing is social networking. But there's going to be other great big things coming down the line that will completely change our way of thinking, not only of interacting with each other, but what technology is. Just keep an open mind and keep trying things, see what works, and toss out the things that don't.
I think it's going to become the way we educate students as we move forward, especially in the K-12 zone. I think it's going to allow us to focus on education as opposed to schooling and redefine what schooling looks like, but by maintaining a focus on education. These are very different learners than the kind of students the schools that we have right now were designed for. There's a very different purpose in mind for education, and I think as we see more and more of this start to have effectiveness and gain some traction, it's going to be too attractive and be too successful to ignore. So I think that we're going to see great changes in the way that our students are educated.
All the trends show that more students are moving to online charter schools, more students are moving to homeschooling, all of those alternatives to what we believe are traditional schools. If traditional schools don't move, they're not going to see students. I think part of the answer is what Robert talked about, which is a systematic change, or the districts begin to roll out tools that can be used online and teachers begin to use that. Every teacher needs to become an online teacher at some level.
And I think that's what I was going to go for, is having every student having the ability, every teacher having the content there, so that students from the time they come into the schools at age 5 or 6 until they're out have that opportunity to learn what they want to, the way they want to, and be challenged individually by their instructor, by their facilitator for their course. And I have a much more grandiose idea, but it's not going to fit in 30 seconds, so I'm just going to have to leave it at that.
One thing that I'd like to add to this is, for me, what I want to see is real personalization. I want the student to have true control. And I think that our first iterations of blended, moving traditional classroom teachers over to blended, they're going to not want to give up that control over pace, over content, over these types of things. I think as we progress into this, I think that true ability to personalize it for the student, working collaboratively with the student to help them choose the path that they want, is going to make a big difference in making this successful and transformative. So it's just something to think about. We got a couple minutes here. Let's open it up to the floor. Brian, you want to heckle us?
Can you really take bad classroom teaching and translate it to great online teaching, or is it better to blow it up?
Yeah, you're talking about building a new house or remodeling.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a bad classroom teaching is not going to does not translate well online.
Please come up and use the microphone.
Sorry.
Please.
I'm assuming everyone can hear me.
No, but we have online audiences, and they cannot hear you.
Brian asked you.
Looking at a variety of online courses, I'm beginning to see many online courses by commercial vendors that basically replicate a very bad classroom model.
Mm-hmm.
Teacher lectures, students do worksheets, then we take a multiple choice test.
Mm-hmm.
That's already a failed model in a face-to-face classroom. So why is it any better online?
Who said it was better?
I think it is.
I think
Everyone seems to be jumping in, very excited about online learning, but I still am hearing a lot of this old model when we're talking about our excitement of online learning, rather than a
specifically in
completely
blended.
new model of maybe teachers now sage on the stage rather than lecture. Then I could go on.
Well, Bob touched on, for me, I'll throw this in there. Bob touched on constructivism, that I think that the best online courses are really constructivist, where the student is really creating meaning through their experience. Gary Steger would love us for dropping that in there. But the reality is that what we are seeing, Brian, as you have have stated, is that we're seeing a lot of content that's just moved from, instead of it being in a textbook, you're reading passages and then you're turning around and answering a multiple choice assessment. That's not transformative. That's not doing anything different. But when you're using tools like Rob was describing as Web 2.0 that allows students to express meaning in different ways, that allows students to construct meaning, that is much more transformative. But I think that we have a ways to go. I think we're still in the infancy in all of this, whether it's adaptive assessments, whether it's courses that are truly dynamic and truly customized for a student. I think we're really at the infancy. Anybody else?
I think there has to be a shift in the way teachers assess as well, that multiple choice tests aren't the only way to assess. That if a kid could construct a collection of research, that's just as good, or could be a rewarding assignment, just as if they had to write a 5-paragraph traditional essay. And that's one of the great things, is if you're going to have a kid do some really exciting thing off of a tool like using Glogster or something like that, there's got to be different rubrics and different acceptance, that there's different ways to assess our students.
Rob, do you want to jump on that?
I think it's important I missed the joke, sorry. Great. The important part to realize is that people deal with things they're comfortable with first. And they're comfortable with how curriculum's been organized. It's going to take some time before it's going to look better than it is, because it takes that transformation that other panel members have talked about.
Anybody else want to jump on here? Any other questions?
Come up.
Come on, come up to the mic.
Come on down.
Come on.
Get
down.
your
It's the
exercise
Price is
today.
Right.
I just had a question. You talked about K2 and early learning. Not that long ago, we used to have this debate whether that was developmentally appropriate for young kids. Also, you talked about kids taking control of their own learning. I assume you're talking about process and not so much content. But maybe you guys would address that, online learning for really young kids.
Well, when I talk, I'll address the control thing. What I'm describing is students being able to choose the methodology that works best for them. If they find that reading content and interacting with it, that is the best way, what they're most comfortable with, as long as they're mastering the content, that's ultimately what matters. If there's students that are much more visual, that need a visual or a tactile environment, you want to be able to support that no matter what. And it just, again, it takes the shift away from the teacher being the lecturer to moving it towards the teacher actually truly facilitating the student learning by helping them to identify how they learn best and also providing the access to the resources. And that's where OER, Open Educational Resources, hopefully there's great promise in that, that we'll be able to see larger libraries that teachers can tap into, can create, doing what Steve had described earlier, create and share and consume at the same time.
And I think if we can if blended and online learning are looked at as alternatives, not substitutes, that it doesn't have to be that everyone has to take online or everybody has to take a traditional class, because I know some people that love a lecture and they would love to, take university classes from great lecturers and they learn great that way. Others, that would be, like getting a root canal. And so it's great that the technology provides that opportunity for our future students to have that freedom to choose.
And I want to kind of throw in a note of heresy here. Our whole educational system is basically industrial revolution based and based on the written word. But there are tons of other ways of communicating, and technology is opening that up, even to very young children. And scientists are beginning to learn in early, with experiments with early children and experiments with animals, that they're a hell of a lot smarter than we ever thought they were.
I was going to say almost exactly the same thing. I started my career in elementary school and working with very young kids, and from the get-go, I really felt we underestimated what they're capable of. What's nice about the tools is that we now have a medium for them to be able to show what they're capable of doing while still getting the support they need, so that they feel secure and safe doing it.
And then the last thing I'd add for K2 just in general is that it's all about balance. Realistically, those kids need to be out doing physical activities. They don't need to be spending the entire time on the computer. I struggle with that with my 2.5-year-old who constantly wants to, I think the joke is that our 6-month-old, his first word will be iPad. Because that's all Ethan likes to say is, Daddy, iPad, iPad, iPad. And he wants to play with it all the time. So it's about balance, and I think that's really important at the K2 level as well. Ensuring that they have opportunities to do physical activities, learning in more tactile ways, writing as well. You have to develop those gross motor skills or those fine motor skills as well. So I think that between those elements, I think it's important.
And face-to-face social skills,
that too.
Yeah, and I'll just add, first of all, my son's second word was apple and his first word was not dad, so that can show you where he was, but and still is. But I think especially K2, K3, K4, where it's so center-driven, when you're in the classroom, it becomes a really natural fit for the students. I think it becomes a natural fit for the teacher, which is why I found some of those second, third grade teachers are some of the easiest to work with in bringing in the blended idea. They're already in a really, they're teaching from that idea of centers already, that idea of students being able to choose and investigate and do a number of different activities, and they're probably the most comfortable with that idea of chaos. So I think it flows very nicely. Again, it's not what you want 24/7 there, but it is a tremendous opportunity for students, I think, in that room.
Well, we've run over, so I appreciate everybody coming today. Thank you very much. Thank you to our virtual audience. Thank you to our panel members. I offer you my gratitude, and thank you for making my job easy.